All right, so we've heard a lot of stories tonight from the wait list. The theme is something really fun is happening that we want to participate in, but we can't. And look, human suffering is not a contest. Your trauma is not competing with my trauma. But I am from the everyone gets a trophy generation, so I think I deserve some sort of recognition for being left out of a huge part of life, because I literally can't have sex. Where is my award? Actually, don't worry about it, I made my own certificate. Like, I'm obviously exaggerating for comedic effect and shock value. Sex is a broad term that encompasses a number of really fun activities, most of which I can do. But to avoid sounding too clinical, for our purposes, when I say sex, I'm going to be referring to heteronormative penile vaginal penetrative intercourse. Rolls right off the tongue. My whole adult life, sex has been, at best, super painful, and at worst, absolutely impossible. Anytime something comes near my vagina, it's like hitting a brick wall. I was trying to think of a way to illustrate this for you, but I actually don't have to, because some of our greatest artists already have. Tunnel painted on the side of a mountain, that is my vagina. I knew something was up when I was pretty young and I tried to use tampons for the first time, but when I was 18, I went to my first of many shitty gynecologists. This is how I remember her. I don't know if you've ever had someone scolding you to relax while they try to jam hard, cold steel into your vagina, but to give you a metaphor that might paint the picture, it is exactly like someone scolding you to relax while they try to jam hard, cold steel into your vagina. There's just no other way to describe it. Eventually, this doctor ripped off her gloves, stood up, and said, "Have you even had sex yet?" I hadn't, something that was becoming its own source of concern. And she sighed and said, "Well, you don't need a pap smear until you do. Come back when you're more loosened up. Try having a glass of wine." If you're keeping track, remember that I was 3 years away from the legal drinking age. My gynecologist opposite of slut-shamed me. She diagnosed me as a virgin, and for that, the treatment is apparently Merlot and a penis. I thought that was weird. I had sex eventually, but it was not a good time for anyone. I spent my 20s hearing about my friends' casual sexual exploits, while any sex I had involved a lengthy, embarrassing conversation or a workaround. Let me tell you what 25-year-old fuckboys love. They love a serious conversation containing medical jargon and emotions where sometimes the girl cries a little. The silver lining is that I explored the huge spectrum of activities that sex could be. I could have gone pro when it came to phone sex. I got really good at oral sex, and then I resented every man I performed it on. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized what a waste of time and energy that resentment was, because there were so many other things I could have been resenting men for. Paying their salaries, catcalling, pockets in their clothes, higher metabolisms, mansplaining, manspreading, unearned confidence, interrupting, leadership advantage, ability to walk alone at night, double standards. I mean, why do they get to be silver foxes while we turn into old crones? The patriarchy, emotional immaturity, bodily autonomy, revenge porn, defending predators, calling us too emotional, like anger isn't an emotion, entitlement, mommy issues, misogyny, lack of accountability, speaking over us, trivializing our interests, assuming they're the default human, being called such a good dad for doing the bare minimum, cheaper haircuts, learned helplessness, passing laws about our reproductive health, and telling us to smile more. Got a little carried away. I went over the margins. If this were my one-woman show, coming soon to a sketchy black box theater near you, I'd tell you about all the shitty gynecologists and primary care physicians I saw over the years. But for now, I'll summarize. From the age of 18 on, I experienced nearly 2 decades worth of shame and medical gaslighting before I finally got a diagnosis at the age of 36. I had, and still have, a constellation of symptoms and disorders, including vaginismus, vestibulodynia, and this one that I still can't pronounce. Now everyone knows what all of these are, so I won't bother defining them for you. I'm just kidding. There's absolutely no medical research or awareness or education about gynecological disorders. So, the involuntary spasming of the pelvic floor muscles, pain at the entrance to the vagina, and painful sex. We really can have it all. But wait, there's more. There was a part of me that still thought this was all in my head. If I could just have a glass of wine and relax the way that so many doctors at that point had told me to, sex wouldn't be painful. But in addition to that not being how any of this works, I would soon come to learn that there was an even bigger physical reason for my pain. Shortly after my initial diagnoses, my new, very good doctor held my hand in an operating room as I slipped into unconsciousness. I'd still never been able to tolerate a pelvic exam or pap smear awake, so this was the only way she could lift the hood and poke around, so to speak. When I woke up, she was standing by my bed and she said, "You have a lot of hymen." If this were my sex ed class, coming soon to a sketchy black box theater near you, I'd tell you about all the different types of hymen. But for now, all you need to know is that a normal hymen is a thin, crescent-shaped membrane at the base of the entrance to the vagina. I was born with something called a microperforate hymen, too much rigid hymenal tissue that nearly covered the entrance to the vagina except for a teeny tiny opening. None of the shitty doctors I saw had looked close enough or understood what they were seeing, and they all dismissed me without mentioning it. And normally your hymen goes away after penetrative sex. Or like horseback riding or whatever. Or just because time passes and it wears away. But mine was stubborn, and a couple of months after that particular diagnosis, it had to be surgically removed. Meaning that I didn't let just any random dude pop my cherry. I held out for a doctor. Now at this point, I'd kept quiet about this for decades. It was the loneliest time. But once I had a vocabulary to describe what was happening to me, I started opening up to friends, family, communities on the internet. I said the word hymen to my dad more times than either one of us was comfortable with. The number of times we both would have been comfortable with being 0. But I started to feel less alone. And I guess you're wondering now that my hymen was gone, this should have solved all my problems, right? This is the end of the story. I still have to say the word vagina at you a few dozen more times. I'd spent a lifetime anticipating pain, so my vagina still tried to protect itself by spasming anytime something went near it. Eventually, I started pelvic floor physical therapy, which is a lot of lying on a table casually chit-chatting about Thanksgiving plans while a stranger has her finger inside of you. Which, from what I understand, is good preparation for marriage. Like, eventually in every relationship, you end up discussing life admin while someone is inside of you, right? But PT also involves something called dilators. They are essentially prescription-strength dildos. They're used for a variety of medical purposes, including painful sex. This is my set. There are 8 of them. But about a month after I got them, the company released size 9. It is 7.5 inches long. Their scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think about whether they should. They were quick to be like, you probably don't need 9. Don't expect to meet a 9 out in the wild. But oh my gosh, you guys, PT also involves so much lube. Lube is like Britney Spears, very messy but powerfully important to our culture. Before I used the dilators for the first time, my physical therapist said, "Let me show you a trick." And she squirted a healthy amount of lube onto a folded up paper towel and rolled the paper towel around the dilator until it was fully coated. And as she was doing this, she looked up, smiled, and said, "This is how my family butters corn." When Gus first announced the theme of the show a few months ago, I thought immediately of this huge part of my life, years watching what other people had and not being able to participate fully. But my concern was that the story didn't have an ending. I am only up to the 4th dilator. I'm taking a break from all kinds of sex until I graduate from physical therapy. If I'm being honest, this abstinence was kind of a retroactive decision, but it still counts. I'm owning it now. The point is, I'm not a success story. I still struggle with my mental health tied to this issue, still can't be in a functioning relationship. And maybe the fact that it doesn't have an ending is why I wanted to tell this story. Maybe the moral, the message, is that if you want something badly enough, you have to enter into the journey not knowing if you'll ever actually achieve it. Maybe. But last month I went to the gynecologist. I go to the gynecologist pretty regularly now because of all of this, but it had been 6 years since my pap smear under general anesthesia, and you're supposed to get them every 5 years, so I was overdue. My new good doctor, this is her, she was impressed with my PT progress, and she said, we can try, and if it doesn't work, no big deal. She talked me through positioning myself in the stirrups, letting my legs fall open as wide as they could. She told me when to take deep breaths, the deep breaths you could feel all the way down in your vagina. She used the smallest speculum possible. She talked me through every step. And on July 8th, 2025, I had my first conscious pap smear. It only took 24 years. Now, it occurred to me writing this that this ending might sound familiar to some people, and that's because this is exactly the way the Barbie movie ended. That just feels kind of right, you know? And so maybe my story doesn't have an ending yet, but I have to trust that I'm where I need to be right now. And it is finally starting to feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And by tunnel, I mean my vagina. Thank you.